You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players, and all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 140 of Arsenal Pass. This week in the pod, Brendan lets loose on some hot takes. I sit on the fence yet again, and the community tries to get us cancelled with some spicy questions, I've heard, Brendan.
I don't know. That's not what I got from the question. So yeah, we have a question, sort of a mailbag episode, a question-based episode. We field the questions from the Arsenal Pass Discord as well as Twitter. I think we have some good ones here, and I don't think any of them are particularly too hot, to be honest. But maybe it's just maybe my palate is a bit more adventurous than yours.
Boring. No. I just Brendan curated the questions. I had a small read before, but I like to be surprised. I like to be surprised and delighted by the questions. A little bit of prep is necessary, but there's some great questions coming up in the pod this week. But before that, Brendan, this week in Flesh and Blood, I mean, we're in the true Flesh and Blood off season. So I don't know, what are you doing with your time? Are you playing any Flesh and Blood? It is true off season. So what are you doing with your time?
I'm not playing card games. I mean, like I said, Flesh and Blood for 2024 is sort of a paradigm shift for me. And I will be playing the game mostly for the competitive aspect and the team aspect and, the tier 4 tournaments. Like that is my angle and my interaction with the game. And I don't want to burn myself out before I go through that process, because that process is inherently, intense, right? It will lead to burnout. So it's a welcome break. I know a lot of other people are taking breaks, but other people are enjoying. There was a Battle Harden. We'll talk about that. But other people enjoying playing Battle Hardens. They're playing Skirmish or playing Blitz. So I'm all for it. But in terms of me engaging with the game, I'm waiting for the Pro Tour prep.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I didn't play any Flesh and Blood this past week. I think I said on the pod last week, I really wanted to try and get to a skirmish for the last weekend. There was a Team Blitz event on at a local store near me, there's a question coming up in the main topic of the pod, so I don't want to spoil it, that someone sort of alludes to the kind of change in Living Legend format, but it sounded like the weekend was quite interesting, the final week of skirmish. And I know James White threw out a tweet sort of talking about the change in Living Legend and what that meant for heroes evolving over the weeks of skirmish, and skirmish looks very different to how it used to. To be honest, I'm invigorated to play these events more than ever before because of so I feel like one of the toughest things if I'm going to go to a skirmish, right, Brendan, is like I know nothing about the Blitz format because I haven't touched Blitz since the World Championship last year. So I think I might have played 1 or 2 games of Blitz since then. So if I rock up, right, and I feel like I'm disadvantaged because everyone knows the Blitz format, but if there's a Living Legend check every Friday and the format's changed a lot, I feel like it's a bit more of an even playing field for me, So I'm more interested personally in playing Blitz events in the coming weeks, months, etc. with this change. But we can talk more about that. But anyway, I heard people had some good fun in the weekend. The team I was meant to be a part of, they ended up picking up another player and they won the event. So I was like, they upgraded from me and they managed to win the team event. So
nice.
I probably would have played some absolute jank and taken them to the bottom of the table. So should we talk news?
Go for it.
Well, I mean, to be fair, true Flesh and Blood off season, not as much happening in the news. There's a Battle Hardened Hanover happening this weekend, and last weekend was a Battle Hardened. Do you know much about this Battle Hardened? Because I've been trying to find some information about this Battle Hardened on the LSS website, on Twitter. I can't find much from the Battle Hardened the weekend. I'd heard you messaged me and said, "Oh, Kano won a Battle Hardened." And I was like, "Did it?" I hadn't heard, but.
So Kano did win a Battle Hardened. I just want to get the player's name correctly. So
where was the Battle Hardened? Which country was it in?
Oh, I have no idea in regards to that. I forgot to delete Twitter on my phone, so I can't do that. Well, Peter was doing like an interview with that person. I just let people I gave you all an insight into my my mental health in regards to social media as I delete and reinstall apps.
I've got it here.
Go for
it. Julian. Orlando. So it was the Battle Hunt in Orlando. So that's right. I did catch a little snippet of this, but I don't think LSS will put up an article. Obviously, by the time this pod drops, Brennan, LSS will have a full-fledged article on recapping the Battle Hardened, because we've now said that we don't have any information on it. But yeah, Julian won the Battle Hardened on Kano. I don't know what the kind of like top 8 split was for the event, but yeah, I mean, congrats. Kano winning Battle Hardened. Got to make you feel good, Brennan.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is now, like, at least from the small amount of Twitter that I have engaged with, everybody's talking about Kano. Actually, it's pretty funny. We have a question about Kano in our question section.
That's your bubble, dude.
But people are really talking about it, and I even see people talking about like its design, its position in the game, etc. And it's just so funny how a recency bias toward a couple results just leads people to be like, "Oh, is this a problem? How like is this deck is good? I mean, this deck is real. I mean, the deck has been around for a long time. I just think it wasn't as well positioned as it is right now, and people have to make actual choices if they want to include cards to tech against Kano, where before that was less the case, as there was another wizard in the format. So the conditions have gotten better. The player base has gotten much better at playing Kano on the aggregate. So yeah, we've coalesced into a situation where now Kano has taken down a Battle Harden. I think Peter took a Battle Harden down with it. It did very well at the Living Legend format. I mean, it is just, it's still a niche deck. But it's not like you don't have to be a part of some weird cabal to play the deck, which is what it felt like before. It was just like these sects of people that were Kano players, and everybody else, I don't know, just didn't play the deck or didn't know how the deck worked. And I just don't think that's the case anymore. It's sort of I don't even know if I call it a B tier deck, but it is a viable choice for these tournaments if you think it's a good meta pick. So I mean, cool place to be in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was thinking there was going to be some more Kano cope, but actually I think the Kano cope started when you were like, oh, it did well in the Living Legend format. Was that when it was in one of the top 8s of the Living Legend
It didn't
format?
make top 8, but it almost did. And both players, like 2 players almost took it to a top 8 there. So, I mean, yeah, it's just interesting to see how the deck performs in different metas because it's a meta-dependent deck. So in the most overpowered format that exists in Flesh and Blood, it sort of held its own. I know that on the surface, it doesn't look like that because there was 8 Starless in the top 8, but there were a lot of Kanos. I mean, when I say a lot, there was like 2 to 3 at the top tables till the very end when they got pushed out.
Yeah. And I know at Battle Harden Orlando, I was just going back to, there was some messages in our group chat. I know there was 2 Kanos in the top 8, for instance. I know one was a little bit different, had like defense reactions in it, I think. And then Julian's who won was maybe a bit more traditional. And then because it also had like, I know like Azuri did well over Orlando this weekend as well. I think Guy calling Dallas winner, right? On Dromai was now on Azuri this weekend, which is, I'd love to know why he picked up Azuri actually in particular. But yeah, I mean, a good weekend for Kano. And I think you're right. You said specifically about like the dichotomy of whether you, like if you now play Arcane Barrier or if you play like Oasis Respite, like you're playing it almost specifically for Kano now, right? It's not like you're playing it for, you don't even necessarily get the splash because like Viserai isn't really playable, Vincent isn't really showing up. So even just like the splash kind of, like people will show up with lists that have AB0 in it.
Yep,
probably.
For sure. I mean, you have to make
it's probably correct too, a lot of the time.
I mean, people were playing cards to tech against Kano when it was absolutely not correct, when it was, less than 1% of the field, less than 0.5% of the field, people were still teching for Kano. Yeah. But you do have to make an actual choice. It's funny, Hayden, we had a comment on the last video in regards to Kano versus Icelander in the matchup, and someone was saying that it irks them that I talk about Icelander being a bad matchup because Kano has a deterministic combo into Icelander. Which is hilarious, because like that whole conversation is just an absolute bell curve. You start out thinking the matchup is bad. Then you go to the top of the bell curve, you're like, deterministic combo, can't lose. And then you end up on the other end, and it's like, oh, you can't win because they beat you in every single way. But I do think that Kano's in a better position with Icelander leaving the front for multiple reasons. One, Icelander is a bad matchup. There is no deterministic combo. You can try to do it, but we'll see how that works. And Arcane Barrier. Arcane Barrier is a choice. And that's a big change in the Classic Construction format as a whole, is that you have to make real costly choices to put these cards in your deck, when that was not the case before. You still can play shit like Sand Cover, for free if you're playing Jermai, but just having that instance of Arcane Barrier is actually a choice now. Yeah.
And because, over here, we're so good on the fly at investigative journalism and digging deep, I have found the meta breakdown and the top 8 from Battle Harden Orlando. So we can just quickly reflect on the non-Kano. Of course, again, just congratulations to Julian taking out on Kano. But The top 8 of actually let's go meta breakdown first. Just a little bit of a meta update as we head towards Christmas. We've got another Battle Hardened next weekend as well, Hanover. But Bravo was the most played. So 106 players, 7 rounds at Battle Hardened Orlando. Brendan, Bravo most played hero, then Azalea, then Dromai, then Azuri, interestingly, and then Leviah and Rhina. So Rise of the Brutes at Orlando, and Brute did make an appearance in top 8, I believe. It did not. So unfortunately, and then you go down to like Dash IO, Fi, Kano, Dorinthia, etc.
What about normal
still surprised.
Dash? OG Dash.
Yeah, like the 5 copies. So like the
That's wild.
14th most played, which is really interesting to me when I look at especially what did well at the top tables. But yeah, well, I mean, if Brute's highly represented it, and Zuri, and yeah, interesting. Top 8 was 2 Kanos, so Justin and Julian, the 2 Js on the Kanos. There was 1 Azalea, there was 2 Dromais, there was 2 Azuris, and then Chris Martin of Coldplay on Dorinthia. It's great to see him out there. I mean, it's a different Chris Martin, obviously, but don't make the joke.
You say obviously, but it's not obvious.
So yeah, interesting top 8. I mean, what do you think about like Azuri, like 2 Azuris in top 8? I mean, obviously we saw Azuri take out Calling Melbourne. Wasn't on people's bingo cards that weekend, and like, is it in a better spot now that Iceland is gone? Like, surely, right?
Azuri's like my biggest void when it comes to Flesh and Blood knowledge around a hero. It's like Azuri is just the black box, just the hero that I have had virtually no interest in, and has not been super relevant at the tournaments that I have both attended or casted.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know. I'm not an Azuri specialist. I've not looked too much into the deck, how it's adapted to the new metagame, etc. So yeah, I don't know. Oh, who won the calling battle? Melbourne, by the way. Do you remember the name?
Yeah, that's Ben Dodd.
So Ben
Missouri
recommended a game in an article that he did. I don't know where he did it. I think Sam Dando did the article on Ben. Ben recommended a game called Imposter Kings. It's a card game.
Okay.
It's a board game card game. One of the best games I've ever played, actually. It's really, really good.
I saw you say that every 2 weeks.
Nah, this one's good. This one's really
Imposter
good.
Kings. Is this the one on Steam?
No. It's a physical card game.
It's a board game. Okay.
It's really, really, really good. Like, Ben swore by it, so I bought it. I don't think Ben knows that. I don't know if he listens to this, but I bought it on his recommendation. It was really, really good. So
shout out to Ben Dodd then.
Yeah.
All right. Should we move on to, I guess, what is kind of the Commander Cookout and a whole topic, because this is community questions answered, burning questions. Brendan, where do you want to start? We've got some questions from Twitter. We've got some questions from Discord. Shout out to everyone who submitted questions. We're going to read majority of these questions. Had a lot come from our Arsenal Pass Patreon Discord, and as well as Twitter, where we put a question out on the Arsenal Pass official account. If you aren't following us on Twitter, why not? Obviously. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to start, Brendan?
All right.
I'll let you be question master.
So it comes from Discord. Blasphemafet, they say, after another Starvo win at an LL tournament, this one at the Coaxing, do you think LSS should continue to let the format be as is, or do you think they should make adjustments? If so, what adjustments should be made? And there was a follow-up that said, should they just ban the hero? Hayden. So is there any system in place for Living Legend format? It is just bans, right? There is no like additional Living Legends. So if this hero just kept winning, it wouldn't rotate itself out of the Eternal format. That's kind of funny. I mean, they have to do something, right? Because the hero is blatantly overpowered. Like it's not really a question. It's not like, oh, the meta conditions weren't correct and, the Starvos really got away with it this time. Like, no, the hero is actually just fundamentally overpowered. So they have to have some sort of change. I don't think they could just leave it like that, because Starvo actually constricts the design of like every single hero that might come into Living Legend as well. Because Living Legend is not a Living Legend format. It's an open format. Everything is legal. So
wow,
what is not legal?
Yeah, no, everything is legal. So it's funny because I just laugh because the prior weeks leading up to the World Championships, I was saying, I was like, well, I might play the Living Legend event if I'm around on the Sunday, and I don't want to go do sightseeing, or, not in top 8, obviously, not in top 8, or day 2 of calling, whatever it might be. And I was like, well, there's only one clear, like, you just have to play Starvo. And people are like, no, you don't have to play Starvo. Like, Fi, you have Stubby Hammerers, you have like, Lexi's been showing up in, like, some of these early Living Legend, like, events that people have been running, off like not official and things like this. And I was like, there's no world where you can't not play Starvo. Like it has Awakening, like especially early on in the format, like it has just everything.
Also, late into the format, it still has everything. I mean, the hero is actually overpowered. It has been since its inception because it faces you with one of the worst dynamics that has ever existed in Flesh and Blood, which is big-ass damage plus a shitload of disruption. What do? Like, it's like, oh, I'm hitting you.
Well, there is ways to beat it.
What's the best way to beat it?
Just absolutely kill him in one turn. Just combo him.
Yeah. I don't know how reliable that is.
Viscerai, baby.
Yeah, Viscerai sucks in that format because Warmongers is literally everywhere. They also free roll Warmongers in Starvo.
Why is Warmongers good against the Viscerai OTK, though?
I guess not. I guess it's against regular. Still, Viscerai got shit canned at the freaking Living Legend format. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know how many people actually played it, though. I don't think many people played it.
I saw quite a few. I mean, I was walking around those tables pretty much all of that day. There was more than a few. I think some people were off of it because of Warmonger's recital, but in terms of the combo, I mean, what Viscerai combo deck is it? Because the class constructed Viscerai combo deck that existed in the Starvo format, I thought was bad into Starvo. I thought people were hard coping.
No, you're playing the new card. What's it called? The Fantasia card.
Fantasia. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's a list that I don't have experience with, but I'd be surprised. I mean, I assume we would see it by now. But yeah.
Regardless. Well, I think a couple of people did play it at Worlds, but there was a bunch of people not playing Starvo, and it felt like you either played Starvo or the deck that beat Starvo, but people played a bunch of other stuff as well. So most people,
right? That's the issue of Prism. Prism's like okay into Starvo, I guess. Like it used to be favorable, but your Prism gets absolutely wrecked by most of the other decks that are in that format.
Yeah, and it might have been close to even. Maybe some people said it was favorable with Awakening gone, but definitely not when Awakening was legal. So
I think it was. I actually think it was even with Awakening, but Awakening is like. So if they ban, let's get to the question. Should they ban something? Yes, they should ban Awakening because Awakening is a toxic card because it allows the Starvo to play two game plans simultaneously, both which are completely polar opposite from one another. One is that they are falling behind in tempo, and then they have a card that immediately switches them back onto the aggressive foot and actually incentivizes the opponent to like not hit them with damage because they get so much value off of this random card. I think that they should ban Awakening first and foremost. I think that could allow decks to come back into the format. I don't know if it would be enough, but Awakening is the weirdest card that has been designed in Flesh and Blood, in my opinion, up until now.
Yeah, I know when the article was published first, introducing LL as a format and saying that it would premiere at the World Championships. Obviously, it had been hinted at for a long time. Been spoken about. James had always said that this is a format that was coming, and then when the article dropped, it was made really clear that for the World Championships in particular, this would be open, completely open, no everything legal. This is the first time we're showcasing Living Legend. Now, ultimately, of course, that resulted in a top 8 that was 8 Starvos. Starvo, of course, winning. But it was made clear that the ban list could be used and potentially would be used. So I think, should they ban cards in Living Legend? Yes, it's just because it's an eternal format, like a true eternal format in terms of there's no rotation of heroes, doesn't mean that we can't utilize the ban. And I think that's what you've got to utilize, right? You have to utilize the ban list. And we've seen it in other games. You look at, something like Magic, of course, Brendan, with a format like previously extended prior to what is now Pioneer and Modern, but of course Legacy as well, Vintage, like cards that are restricted or banned. Like
in general,
you do have to use it.
The more eternal the format, the longer the ban list.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, let's answer the last question. Should they just ban the hero?
No.
That's interesting. I don't think so. I guess because there's so much they could do outside.
What's the point of the format then?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, if the hero text is actually that broken, then they might have to, but I think they could ban around it and suspend cards. So I don't know if it would negate the integrity of the format if they ban Starvo, but it would be weird. And there's definitely a lot more they could do before that. And I don't think that Starvo in and of itself, agnostic of all the other broken cards you're putting into that deck, is so fundamentally powerful that it's just going to be 8 of the top 8 every single time if you don't actually ban the hero. So should they ban the hero? No. Should they make adjustments? Absolutely. If they don't make adjustments, the format is like so boring. I want to ask a question though to the people listening. Anybody who got this like Stockholm syndrome in the past couple of years and was like, oh, Starvo is good for the game. It was like, it let people come in and do well. How do you feel now if you play Living Legend? How do you feel about Starvo? You still enjoy it? You still think it's good for the game? Because I agree with you on the design concept that bad players or new players or ignorant players should be able to have some sort of chance to win a game. But a hero that just negates so much of the game's design, so much of skill expression, it's just not fun, in my opinion. And I don't know, I was at the Living Legend format in the at the World Championships, and everybody who was playing that hero was just like, they were having fun, I guess, for the day, but they verbally expressed existential dread towards having to play that hero. It did not seem like they actually enjoyed it. They thought it was silly and dumb.
Yeah, but I will go back to the fact that I truly believe that Starvo was good for the game. But I will say, I don't think cards like Awakening are good for the game. I don't think, like you pointed out, a card that allows you to simultaneously like get rewarded for playing in a negative fashion towards a game, you know, and basically get bailed out is not a good place for a game to be, I think. To basically have like, oh, I drew the card that like gets me out of the situation for free, even regardless of how I played the game up to this point. Like that's not a good card design, right? So
you're an opposing fire. What are you going to do? Not attack me?
Yeah, terrible.
Nah.
That's rubbish.
All right. Next.
Your opponent gets the free chance to attack you with their on hits while you try and hopefully kill them before they draw Awakening.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
All right. Next one comes from Zachary. They say, what's your position on the signature weapon system for Living Legend weapons? I worry it does more harm than good, and LSS could just ban the problematic weapons that stifle design. What are your thoughts on this? This is a weird system, right? We've had multiple heroes Living Legend where we're like, oh no, Waning Moon's gone. It's like, oh yeah, that was actually Kraken's Aether. It's like, we've had good things rotate out, I guess, in like Rosetta Thorn, which was just overwhelmingly the best weapon, but it does feel like you have this system in the form of Living Legend that is self-rotating and self-correcting, and it's taking out the problematic heroes, which usually are the root cause of the initial issue or the initial win rate of the deck. Like, it is more attached to the hero than a card that exists in the deck. But then you have this weird collateral damage where it just takes out sometimes a random weapon. And I don't know, it feels bizarre.
I really like it, actually, because I think it adds a different dynamic to how a format can be changed up, or how design principles within deck building can be changed up. So, like, take, for example, Rosetta Thorn leaving with Briar, right? It's like, okay, now that denies access to Rosetta Thorn to, you know, like, we got to see Vincent with Rosetta Thorn and Vincent without Rosetta Thorn. Ultimately, didn't seem to make an impact. Vincent just hasn't made an impact on the format. But, like, in a world where maybe Vincent is slightly stronger, like, that's really interesting. Or I look at something, you know, like, obviously with like Viserai beforehand, it's like, okay, where does Viserai go now? And it doesn't feel like Viserai has the cards right now to compete, but, you know, maybe there's a world where it does, and it's a post Rosetta Thorn world. Maybe there's options where Alice is like, well, maybe we could, I don't think they're going to unban Skelada rather, but, you know, you're in a world where it's like, okay, maybe there's a card we could print that we felt we couldn't print when Rosetta Thorn was legal for Viserai, for instance. I do agree sometimes it can feel negative, and sometimes it can feel arbitrary, like you said before, but I think it's an interesting space for them. I think they have to be really conscious of what that means. But I do think it's interesting.
So I agree with you in the sense that I think weapons rotating is interesting, and I like it. I do think that the current system where they rotate with the hero, what do they even call this system? The signature weapon system?
Signature weapon system, yeah.
Is random and silly. I actually don't like it. But I would like to see weapons frequently rotate out at the similar speed to the hero. So if this is the only way to do it, that's fine. I would take that over it not happening. You know, us living with Rosetta Thorn forever. But yeah.
Really? You'd live with Rosetta Thorn forever?
No, I'm saying like, I would not want to live with Rosetta Thorn forever. So I would want another way of rotating that weapon.
Yeah.
But the current system, like the weapons that rotate, feel absurdly random most of the time.
Why? What feels random about them?
Kraken's Aether Vein has now rotated out of the format. What is that called? Like, what? Why?
Because that was the card that was the weapon.
It's a signature weapon. Outside of this, like...
Yeah, printed with Icelander when it first showed up.
Yeah, but that's just semantum. Like, the card actually had no impact in the classic constructed format and could exist in a more lower-powered format that may be coming after Icelander leaves. Like, why are we rotating weapons that have no impact? If, like, we're in this, like, rotating format of Flesh and Blood, which is class constructed now, were just taking these weapons that had no impact out when you are now creating a situation where they could shine. They're not going to shine in Living Legend. They're shit. That's why they were never played. Why rotate them? That's what I don't understand. Is like, if they're bad weapons and they aren't played, let them exist in the lower powered format.
When was Kraken's Eighth Vein ever going to shine, though?
Kraken's Eighth Vein actually was played at one point in Blitz when Icelander was like first created. That like initial season, it was not good because Combo Viscerai was a deck back then, but it was played.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a playable card. Anyway. All right.
Yeah. When Icelander first got printed, right? Without
Yes.
Wendy Moon.
Yeah. All right. Next one is from Moist Man Boobies. I always love this name. It's been here for years.
Old MMB.
Yeah, old MMB. I never actually read it out. I just say MMB, but it's actually Moist Man Boobies. You know, we're 2 years in. We can say that now. What do you want to see from the new Brute? Do you think Brute card could ever be a Brute card? Do you think a Brute could ever be a meta contender, or is it the unreliable nature of the class is going to keep it down?
It's a good thing that Brendan pre-read these questions so that he wouldn't stumble.
Do you think Brute could ever be a meta contender? Yeah, I mean, it's just my dyslexia, to be honest there, but
We good. So, do we think that Brute could ever be a meta contender? Yeah, I mean, it does have an unreliable nature to it, just a design philosophy, right? It's such an interesting question. Like, I've talked a lot about Brute and like what I want to see from Brute, and I think my thoughts on what I want to see from Brute consistently change because the game has evolved. Right, what I would want to have Brute to look like in the past just wouldn't fit the current fundamentals of what the game is. I think it'd be too out of place. It wouldn't fit the design. Like I wanted to see at one point consistency from Brute, right? It's like, oh, how do we have this kind of like play style that still utilizes discarding system, but allows you to build in a more consistent manner. So you still have like this random nature to like the cards you discard. You still have the fact that there's a dice involved if you're going to use Scabskin Leathers or Barkbone Strapping or whatever it may be, right? But because of like some redundancy in card printing, you can build your decks in a bit more of a consistent way. I think that philosophy of Flesh and Blood design has kind of gone away, like a power consistency sort of like ratio. It's like, you know, LSS are moving more and more towards one or the other, and especially they're moving towards power in an inconsistent nature. So I honestly think if what I want to see from Brute is a little bit of that, like I want to see, I mean, we kind of have that with the talented hero in Leviah, but I think when it comes to Rhinar, like if you instill too much redundancy within Rhinar right now, like it'd be the worst, it'd be the most toxic hero that's ever been in the game, I think. Like imagine if just like you just were consistently intimidating Brendan and with like powerful, like you're just allowing your opponent to not play the game.
Yeah.
Like right now, if you want to build Rhinar in that way, your trade-off is that your power isn't as high. So where do you sit there? I think what I want to see is I want to see a Brute that is focused more around the attack damage itself. You know, like a card like Swing Big is such an interesting card to me. It's powerful, but like it's in a majestic slot.
I think there's a reason.
Like you can only play it.
Intimidate is attached to Underbreak. I mean, Intimidate is a really toxic
It's
mechanic.
ridiculous.
It breaks a tenet of card games, of like healthy card game design, which is it just says your opponent can't make choices. They can't play the cards. They can't make
play
choices.
cards.
Yeah, they don't want that to be consistent. Do we ever think it'll be reliable meta contender? Yes, I do. I mean, especially in the rotating format that we have now with Kirillish's Turbo going out. It
might be right now.
There is a delta, right? There's a delta where your sort of variance or your lack of reliability or consistency is just overshadowed by your power spikes and the inherent power level of your deck. And whenever you reach that equilibrium, the deck is now good. It doesn't matter if it's unreliable. Maybe it's just, even if you have like say the deck was unreliable and you had this inherent fail rate of like 5%. But if you just auto won or got close to auto winning every other matchup, you would play that deck every single day of the week. So there is a balance there. And I think eventually Brute's going to absolutely be a contender. It's just, why would you play a Brute in these recent formats when you could play one of these other heroes that was way more consistent, had just way better card quality? And yeah, I mean, that was sort of the older days of Flesh and Blood. Might not be the case moving forward as these heroes leave the format.
Yeah, I think they have to be careful about it. But okay, so take like Leviah for an example. Like I fundamentally don't. I always thought I was like, oh, I think a Leviah could be interesting. I think there's something that interests me about it. I think there's a way, you know, that this hero evolves and develops into something that can be a bit more consistent. My problem with Leviah is like you're so, whether people want to admit this or not, and they might reflect on it differently and be like, this isn't true, but the constraints to how you have to build your decks in order to play certain games it is actually really narrow, because you have this hero ability and this fundamental built-in blood debt system that just kills you. So like they can print these demi-heroes, they can do this, but the demi-hero doesn't change what is fundamentally the challenge for Leviathan, which is like dying to yourself, right? Like, yes, it maybe helps, it maybe supports, it maybe gives you some power plays to play towards the end of the game that sort of leverage and make you feel like you're making some decisions based on this design system that's going to kill you. But ultimately, it's all kind of the same thing that it was when Leviathan was first printed. It hasn't really changed that much. And I think Leviathan is pretty one-dimensional, and people can disagree if they want to, go for it in the comments. But I think as much as you go like, oh, there's these different builds to Leviathan, they're all the same thing. They might taste slightly different, but they're all fundamentally, they're all made with the same base ice cream. You know what I mean, Brendan? Whereas like, if I want to see a Brute, I want to see some aspects of Leviathan, but maybe without the holdback of how games have to kind of finish or go. Like some of the things about Leviathan I really like Deadwood Rumbler. I love that card. I think that card is so interesting, right?
Yeah.
But it's tied into this fundamental kind of way that I think you have to build and play Leviathan, which hasn't changed since the hero was printed.
It's an interesting push and pull going on here. Because I would ask, like, one of my questions, and you kind of just answered this, like, what do you actually like about Brute, Hayden? Do you like it because it looks like a big savage like beast from the like, what is there some sort of role play thing going on? Because a lot of the key aspects of Brute you don't like. Like a lot of these key design aspects that they're now doubling down on, you actually don't like. Actually, you're completely antithetical to them. You play decks that are the opposite of this. You don't even play decks that are a fart in terms of resemblance to these. Like these are the decks. So what is your affinity towards Brute? Is it like a role play thing? Like what aspect do you actually like?
Yeah, dude, I just let you get up in my big old green Shrek get up and
that's what it seems like. It's like I love it's like, I really want to play Kano, but I just hate arcane damage, It's like what?
Okay, what I really enjoy about Brute really goes back to probably the days of Crucible of War, I think, which is like it really kind of encompassed what I think mid-range was in Flesh and Blood in the early days, which is like you have these aspects of attack damage, you have these aspects of like evasion with the Intimidate and the ability to disrupt your opponent, and then you have the aspects of like efficient trading because you have a lot of like 3 blocks and you have access to be able to kind of like build your deck around sort of different styles. Like you can play defense reactions, you can focus in on Blood Rush Bellows, Claws plans. Like I felt the deck was like pretty nimble, but the problem is like the deck got left behind in power level. Like decks just were as consistent as that and had these kind of dynamic game plans were just more powerful, like Dash, like even eventually Lexi, with cards like Three of a Kind and Codex of Frailty, decks like Guardian in particular that just kind of like left that behind in terms of like the rate of trade and power level. And like Blood Rush Bellows is a really powerful card, like don't get me wrong, right? But it's like kind of the one card that's powerful in what Rhino has looked like in the past, basically since inception. So while I really enjoy this kind of like dynamic between the different play styles and the different sort of things that I'm talking about Rhino now specifically could do, it just never really evolved. And I get it, right? It's like if it becomes too powerful, too consistent, Intimidate becomes too powerful. So it's like, where do you go from there? And I think the question is like, you have to focus in on, I would like to see them, I guess, focusing on 2 of the pillars. I think you can't focus in anymore on Intimidate, Disruption, Evasion. You have to focus in on the trading and the kind of damage side of it. And I think you can have random nature aspects to that, right? Like you can still do things like draw and discard. You can have, but I think what I would actually like to see is come up with a completely new mechanic that interacts with 6 powers. I just don't know what that looks like. I don't know maybe it's not discarding, maybe it's not graveyard based, maybe it's something to do with play. I don't know what it is, but I think there needs to be something else in there design wise that's new and interesting for Brute that can kind of play in with what's already existing, but adds this new, fresh dynamic. Like we've seen it with other heroes, right? Like Ninja has reinvented itself multiple times. We've seen Ranger be reinvented. So like, how does Brute become reinvented to a degree?
Next one is from Laz76. They say, will the meta ignore Kano's Battle Hardened win, or will it respond with Arcane Barrier and Spell Void? So one thing I want to mention that I just remembered while you were talking. Well, one thing I remembered is it wasn't just the Battle Hardened that happened the past couple weeks. We also had the Realm 20k, which I think...
We just talked about that last week, though.
Okay. So there was Kano's the top 8 at that. Obviously, one of them was Peter. I think it was maybe 2. I know there was like a bunch of Kano's at that tournament. So that's why there's been all this talk. One Battle Hardened win, it's significant, but multiple weeks of consistent results. I think that's why Kano's on everybody's mind.
Hey, had a good national season as well. Remember, we cast our mind back to national season where Lexi was legal. I had a good season.
So, will the meta ignore... No, I mean, it'll probably overcorrect, and yes, it will correct with Arcane Barrier and Spell Void. I mean, if you can play Spell Void in your deck, you should play it. If you think there's going to be Kanos, why not? Because Spell Void is very, very, very effective against Kano, and it's a free roll, because the design of Arcane Damage and Arcane Barrier is that, if you just blast your cards and you go all out and you have no care for what I potentially have, well, then you're susceptible to this... multiplicative arcane damage. Spell Void says, nah. It's just on the field. Very, very good against Kano. And if you don't know this, for every Spell Void that you block, it's at least 5 damage on like a Kano combo. So
Wildfire.
Yeah, on Wildfire. So do that. Will it correct with Arcane Barrier Spell Void? Yes. Will it overcorrect? I think so. I think it'll be overcorrected for a bit. Kano it'll be much harder to perform with Kano in these environments, but this is a cyclical system. People start cutting cards out. They have, there's an real opportunity cost now. And the decks, I mean, these tournaments will sort of oscillate between people being prepared or people being underprepared for Kano. But ultimately, after a couple of weeks of consistent results and a battle hardened win to sort of top it off, yes, I do think that people will respond with Arcane Barrier and Spell Void.
Yeah. One battle hardened, one top 8 in the realm, it was Peter. But so this is quite interesting because Spell Void versus Arcane Barrier are very different things. So you talked about Spell Void and the impact of how powerful Spell Void is against the Kano combo, right? Mm-hmm. There is ways to build Kano where you don't have to revolve around Wildfire. Obviously, we're super big fans of that because of the consistency and what that's meant in the past and how that kind of, you get to reenact this game plan that is pretty repeatable, right? You have this pretty repeatable game plan. So if you go and sort of look at the Kano video I did last year, that's something I hit on a lot. But in a world where if people turn to Spell Void, there's actually a world where Kano is still really, really powerful and viable if people aren't playing Arcane Barrier, because you can build... There's a little card called Aether Flare, Brendan. It's a pretty good card.
Yeah, and Spell Void is good against that too. I was going to say, unfortunately, Spell Void is good against all the good Kano cards because they're all multiplicative damage, right? You'd be like, oh shit, they might whip out their Voltic Bolts. It's like... Okay. I mean, the cards you're scared about are Aether Flares, Sonic Booms. If they're not playing well, so I still think Spell Void is really effective against Kano decks that are maybe not all in a Wildfire. But if you're playing a Kano deck that's not all in a Wildfire, you're actually playing a worse Kano deck. I mean, we've spent years as a collective community trying to innovate away from that, and it's just the best strategy Kano has.
So I agree, but I disagree. So I agree that it's the best strategy Kano has, but if the format is evolved to that with Spell Void, there is ways to play around Spell Void, because Spell Void is a one-time use. You set up your Wildfire, you go Wildfire, right? The inherent resource dump that you need into that is so huge. It's the Ragamuffin's hat, it's the boots, it's like an energy potion potentially, it's your tunic counter or your Spellfire cloak. There's a lot of resources involved in that. So Spell Void basically negates the use of all these resources and puts you in a position where you now no longer have, starts and play, stays in play kind of aspects to your deck, your Ragamuffin's hat, your boots, for instance, your energy potion, if that you put into play, your Spellfire cloak, whatever it is. You've now burnt all these, and your opponent's able to negate that with this shield they have. Once that shield's gone, it's gone. But the problem is when you don't have these resources left afterwards to push through more damage, you kind of just dead in the water, right? But if your deck is filled with redundant uses of kind of multiplicative damage against Spell Void, it's actually pretty good. And that was my experience, especially when the format was a little bit slower. It was if people are playing in a format that isn't just hyper aggressive with Spell Void, and if they're playing Spell Void, they should get punished for it. If Guardian plays Spell Void, that is trash. That is not good. But if a slow deck plays Arcane Barrier, as a Kano, are you not frothing if you sit down against your Guardian opponent, they're playing Brava and they have Arcane Barrier 3? You feel pretty good in that game, right? Yeah,
the more Arcane Barrier they have, honestly, yeah. There's one thing you said there. If my Guardian opponent plays Spell Void, I'm shitting myself. It's bad. This is more Starvo because Starvo had access to it. But
of course,
it's bad because Guardian is actually a really aggressive deck. I mean, Spell Void is best when it's paired with an aggressive deck, right? Period. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that there's not a lot of redundant multiplicative damage sources in Kano, and that's the issue. What are you gonna do? They play yellow, blue. I mean, you're probably playing the blue, but there's just not a lot of instances of that. I think
play yellow.
Yeah, I think that the best card against Spell Void is probably Stir Forked or something, to be honest. It's but that's a really weak combination of cards.
Sonic Boom is a particularly powerful card.
Spell Void's good against Sonic Boom.
Is a Yes, but spell void is one-time use, so you can't spell void every single thing. You have to make a choice, and you're forcing your opponent to make a choice. So like, okay, you spell void my sonic boom. Okay, now I'm gonna wildfire you. Oh, guess you die. Okay, you're gonna save your spell void for my wildfire. That's fine. I'm gonna continue to throw Aether Flare turns at you and Sonic Boom turns at you, and I'm gonna find a Red Emeritus off the top of my deck. I'm like, these are the things I'm gonna do. I'm gonna play Cindering Foresight in my deck. I'm gonna start to try and like push big multiplicative damage on multiple turns and see how you respond. I think, and this is definitely something I've played around with before when it comes to Kano, is like if people, but the problem is this has never happened. People haven't just been like, because Icelander was always in the format when people have considered Kano. So it's like, okay, well, like Arcane Barrier is what you play. Or there's been Rosetta Thorn and Runeblades in the format. So it's like, okay, well, I just play Arcane Barrier. But that is no longer necessarily just the default, because the only true arcane damage that's kind of wielding around at the moment is coming from Kano, Vincent, and Viscerai. And no one's playing Viscerai, and very few people are playing Vincent at this point, and people are probably going to play Arcane Barrier 1 max in that matchup. Mm-hmm. So I just think it looks completely different. Anyway, I just want to put it out there, when it goes Kano moving forward, I think that there is a potential that you can take advantage of people moving towards Spell Void as Kano. It's not the end of the road.
Yeah. My only pushback is I think the deck would look the exact same. Like, if there was more Spell Void, I think you just play the same deck. I do think Cindering Foresight.
Kano is a philosophy thing, though, right? It's a mindset. It's how you play. It's a philosophy, a lot of it as well.
I don't know, if your opponent's got Spell Void, you're feeling pretty weak in that philosophy. I'm not going to lie. It's a good card. Anyway, on to the next one. This is from McGrew M. They say, do professional players and grinders have an obligation to attend armories and local events? Given what we know about the OP system, it seems that stores with higher armory attendance get invites for larger events. Grinders and players have an obligation. Well, I hope I hope it's not an obligation. I almost said we, which should have been a huge misnomer. But yeah, I don't know. The more it's interesting, the dynamic between local play and then like tier 4 play. Because of resources like Talishar, and let's pretend Talishar doesn't exist. I don't want to get Talishar like in trouble, but armory play, I'm actually not going to put any logic behind this. I'm just going to say this. It seems to be a trend. It's not everybody. It's not universal. But it seems to be a trend is that as people play more Pro Tours and play more World Championships, not in total, so don't freak out, but sometimes they start playing less armory events. They start playing less local events. Because instead of playing local events, they now play the game with their testing team, or they play it online to play it as efficiently as possible because they need as many, curated good reps as possible. It's not universal. Not everybody does that, but I do think it is a phenomenon that happens.
It's the majority.
Maybe. It's just like one of the statements going to piss people off because they're going to be like, oh, like, as people get good, they just stop playing locally. It's not the case. It's not because locals are bad. It's just because if you're in a lot of my opinion, I'm assuming this is opinion shared by people that follow this behavior, is that if you're preparing for one of these events, the most efficient way to test the game and to prepare for the game is often not at the armory level. It's often at the interpersonal level in a testing team or something like that. So
it's return on investment. Like that's how I see it in particular. We can answer that first question at the end, but the way I see it is like, as much as I want to play armories and skirmishes and go to these events and be there and play and enjoy it, 2, support local stores and those that have kind of created and curated the game in my community. As much as I want to do those things, like my time is being competed for with like the larger events as well. So it's like, I can't do everything, unfortunately. I can't play all these, and maybe there's, and that's not the same for everyone, right? Like I'm speaking from my personal standpoint here. For some people, it's possible to do all of it, but I know for a lot of people, it unfortunately isn't, and you've got to make a decision. And if you're playing these big events, often the decision just naturally becomes, well, this is how I need to spend my time to get the most efficient use of reps, like you just said before.
It's interesting because you using this conversational framework, you're like, I wish I could do this, but then I don't because of X reasons. Or I want to do this. But for me, like some of the stuff, like I actively don't want to do. Like I'm recording in the evenings a lot of times, so a lot of my evenings are taken up. But for me, for a local game store, it's 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. So there's a lot of times where I just don't want to do that. And I wanted to do that in the past because my only way to engage with the game when it was fresh, when it was new, to get exposed to new ideas was to play at the local level. So I went through these barriers that are not enjoyable. Like those are not, dude, an hour commute is not enjoyable for me, especially on like a Thursday night. So now that I don't have those barriers as much anymore, I'm like, sometimes, like a lot of time, actually, it's like I'm making the choice. It's like, I don't want to do that. There's other things in my life I'd rather give attention to than, go spend 3-4 hours at this event. So it's not that I don't want to play locals at all. It's just that it is a larger cost to me now because I'm able to engage with the game in other ways. So in terms of obligation, I don't think so. I do think that for me, I'll talk about something that happened to me like in like early Magic.
Can I ask a question first though? Mm-hmm. Did we not just say the same thing?
I think we did. It's just like, but you said, okay. You said is like the way you phrased it was like that you want to actually do all these things, but you can't because you're doing those other things. It's like, I could do this. I physically could go to more army events, but right. I actually don't want to a lot of the time because it is so inconvenient sometimes. It's not that I don't want to all the times, but I am definitely making a choice. I just want to make that.
But like if there was an armory at the right time of day for you downstairs underneath your house, would you go?
And all my friends from across the world were there. Yeah, I'd probably pop down for a few minutes.
No. You don't have to have all your friends there. Just, you head downstairs because I don't know if you shout out to Fluke and Box, but he literally lives next to his LGS. So okay. I'm always like, if he's not there, I'm like, come on, man, what's your excuse? No. But, like if you're a 30-second walk to your armory and you could choose what time that armory was, it's just your locals that you would normally go to a year ago, whatever it was. Like, I would go to that all the time if I could choose the time. Like, that'd be great. But it's not the world we live in. It's not realistic, Yeah. I there is a commute to get to these things. Like you say, also, I don't particularly want to do that, or I can't do that, and that's the same for a lot of people. So
there's when I first got engaged to California. What the fuck? Where'd that word come from? When I first got engaged to card games, like Magic, I went to a couple Magic drafts. They're like at the local scene when I was really new into the game. I didn't really know much. If there was like a pro player that showed up, that was like really, really cool to me. So I do think that players playing pro tours and world championships, going to armory events less is not a good thing. Because I do, at least for me, when I was first getting into games, like it was really, really cool. Because like being able to be exposed, because if you don't have that support system and those players around you to actually play against players that are in those tournaments, to pair into one of them locally and get to experience that, it was really cool. And there was like this notoriety, and there was this like I was aspiring to do that as well. So it was really cool to see them at locals, which pretty much never happened. It happened like once. I was like, why do these guys not go? These guys play this game for a living. Why are they not at the locals every single week? And it was like mind blowing to me that was not the case. Now I understand, I guess.
All right. Next question. Right. The original question. I don't think there's an obligation, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know about, even if there was an obligation, I still wouldn't do it for the same reasons I don't do it. And I still would do it for the same reasons I do it. It's just like this idea of like an obligation. Probably not. Is it?
It's great though.
Yeah,
it is great.
It is great. I mean, I wish. Yeah, I think it is net beneficial for the game if tier 4 event players go to armories. I think it's a good thing for the game. Like you said, higher armory attendance invites larger events. So you're curating that local scene is really important. Hayden and I were both extremely involved in our local scenes when the game was basically non-existent in like year 1. And as those scenes have grown and they foster their own communities, I don't feel an obligation to be as involved as I used to be.
Dude, I feel like I was going to 4 or 5 armories a week.
Yep, so was I.
For like 6 to 12 months. Like I feel like I've paid my dues, right?
I was paying for like random kids' entries and shit like that. I mean, I was doing like all this kind of stuff just because, I mean, especially in America, like in 2019, nobody was playing the game. So yeah. A different age. Anyway, next one is from old MMB again. Do you think new heroes should have meta relevance?
No.
I don't know about no or yes. I think if you have sets that don't hit. Okay. I'll phrase this from.
Oh, should they? I guess I was thinking the question is like, they should have meta relevance.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, no, they don't need to, but they also should not have relevance. Yeah, I agree with you.
One thing I don't like is when we have sets that come to the game and have actual like close to zero impact, and then I don't want LSS to look at that and be like, "That's a W." It's like it's going to happen in the future because we have this auto-rotating living legend thing that is so intelligently designed, where it's like it's pretty freaking random. And yes, we are coming to the fruition where sets and heroes that didn't have impact in the past are having impact now. But I think that if you're delivering 4 hero sets that do absolutely nothing to the game, you should be reevaluating how you're designing those sets. They should have some impact, because at the end of the day, if they have 0 class constructed impact, people aren't going to buy it. I'm not a scientist of economics, but it's not great. Yeah, because people open these boxes to play the cards in class constructed. There's limited that exist. It's significant, but ultimately, if the box has 0 value, it's just not a great spot. So that's my take.
We spoke about this for like 30 minutes on the pod after Bright Lights dropped, actually, just before Worlds. So you can hear us really dive into that. But I think both of our answers are kind of the same, which is like, it's not a yes, it's not a no, but the set should have some relevance.
Yeah, I mean, set having 0 relevance is an L. It's not a W. That's
I agree.
Next one's from Park of the Local. They say, is the fact that competitive Flesh and Blood is played in person and not virtually why there seems to be a disparity between online demands for bans and rotations, while the metagame/tournament results tend to support a varied and diverse meta, for example, Cheerios Briar into Hayden winning on Viserai, the recent Dramai Fear, etc. Are folks' expectations simply calibrated for digital rather than a purely paper format? So I think that you're not necessarily wrong, but I think that you've kind of twisted what actually happened here, and it's not a digital versus paper thing. There is, to an extent, like Talishar is not a good it's not a good representation of what the game will look at the highest level. Period. It's not. But people call it like in terms of like the Dramai Fear, Cheerios Briar, like those things were all real. I mean, Dramai was one of the best decks at the World Championship. Did it materialize like that? Was it the most played deck? No. But there were a lot of people that, whether it was analog, in paper or in person, they would have thought the same thing. And I think that, people calling for bans based on something's online performance, or what you're alluding to is that they're actually not that good, it has nothing to do with the difference between online and in person. It's just how card gamers interact with card games. And they just, when an idea is popular, when people believe something, they hop on the bandwagon and then they call for a change. And sometimes that idea, that philosophy is not representative of the actual truth of the format. That's not purely based off, sometimes it is just ignorance, and that's fine. That's totally natural, and that's going to happen. I don't think it's a paper versus digital thing. I just think that all of these situations that you were outlining here, like Cheerios Briar being the best deck, it was. It is. It is. And then Hayden winning a Viserai, totally valid. Like, these things just happen. Yeah, I think that just is Flesh and Blood. Maybe people are a bit too quick online rather than they would be in paper, because the sample size is much higher now that we have this online variant. But there's plenty of formats where the best deck is not the deck that wins the tournament, and that is a testament to good design. It's a testament to card games, right? The best deck is not guaranteed to win every single time.
Basically, agree with everything you said, which is except one thing. But I think your point about what Park is saying and kind of the misaligning it to kind of digital versus paper, I think is true. Like, I don't think it has much to do with that, and more it's about just fundamentally how card gamers talk in absolutes a lot of the time as well. But one of the things I do want to point out is like Dromai, right? I do think that that's the one kind of exception to that. Like, you look at, Starvo, Lexi, Cheerios Briar, Chain, like these were all definitely the best decks, and it was kind of insane, right? Dromai was kind of this odd thing where, again, like, there was like this kind of Dromai hysteria with like Tome being printed, and I sat there, like, we talked about this a lot, like, I don't think Dromai was the best deck, and I think Tome didn't help Dromai. But anyway, that's a larger discussion. But I completely agree about the kind of online versus paper. I don't think it's actually relevant.
All right, next one, Brendan C. Great name. How do you go about preparing for a new limited format, both sealed and draft? With the Calling Queenstown set to take place potentially before all the cards have been spoiled, what advice would you give the players heading to that event?
Oh, this is my favorite question, because this is like really related to like Flesh and Blood and playing the game. And this is where I can give you some actual expertise, Brendan. And Brendan. Shout out to Brendan. This is one thing I've been thinking about, right? Because Queenstown, I'll be in Queenstown. It's going to be a very different prospect. We're basically playing a world premiere, and it's a calling. We will have some preview cards available. Like, that is going to happen. How much of the set we'll know about beforehand? Not exactly sure at this stage, right? Like, the preview season is the week prior, right, Brendan? So we will see in a big chunk of cards. I guess my advice for preparing for this is to try and keep it as simple as possible. I think is to try and work out day one. If you want to make day two, first of all, you've got to finish day one with a good record, right? You've got to make that day two record. So the first thing you need to work out is like, okay, what do I need to do in sealed? Draft can come later, honestly. Like focus on sealed first. It's like, okay, that's where you should probably put your effort. And I think the first thing to have a look at is like, as the cards come out, what do we know about this format? What are the core tenets of this format? What are the key, like really understanding the new keywords and archetypes is going to be important. You're right.
I had a sneeze.
It's great for audio. Is understanding, like the keywords. I think it's gonna be the most important thing straight away. So, we've already seen some cards from this format in the form, we know we're getting dual class. Okay, so sit down. What does dual class mean? Like how powerful, like trying to isolate how powerful these cards are, how relevant the dual class cards are. But then also beyond that, we've already seen some of like the mechanics, right? So we know about Clash, we know about what's the other one called? Is it Wager? So we know about Wager. So I think I would sit down and think about, okay, how do I want to use these mechanics? So I'm looking at a card like Money Where Your Mouth Is, right? Which is the common generic action that has Go Again, that gives +3 to your next attack this turn, and it has Wager, right? So it's like, okay, if I'm going to be playing cards like this in my deck, what am I assigning to Wager roughly? We talked about this last week when we talked about kind of seeing some of these cards, Brendan, like what kind of value am I assigning to Wager? Is it a point? Is it 2 points of value? How do I want to use this card? As I start to see some other cards spoiled, it's like, okay, the next thing I'm starting to look at is like, I'm seeing some cards spoiled. What could be my win conditions based on my heroes? We know there's a young Kasai, for instance, in the set. How am I going to utilize Kasai? What are the strategies that I might implement? You're not going to get a chance to play games, right? So I think the fundamental thing you have to do is just understand, like, in theory, like what could my decks look like? How am I going to win games? And try and already have pre-evaluated some cards so that when you're opening and doing your seal pool, you're not having to read every single card and try and evaluate everything on the day. You've already pre-evaluated some of these cards when it comes to the context of the format.
So if it was up to me, if my life depended on winning the Call in Queenstown,
good luck.
I would play with the cards before I play that event. I'll tell you, go listen to a set review from Arsenal Pass. You'll see. You can evaluate something. There's so much theory. Everybody's got ideas. Don't listen to them. You should just print them bitches out and play with the cards. You got to play with the cards. It changes everything.
But the set isn't going to be, the full set isn't going to be available.
It doesn't matter. You need context of cards. Like, you need as many cards as you can. You print them out. You play with them. You build gauntlet decks. It's so important. Like, you can evaluate so many cards in a vacuum, which is what you're evaluating them in when you look at the set or the spoilers. It's hard to contextually bring them all together in a full entire set in your freaking noggin and then be like, this is powerful, this is not. You mostly evaluate cards in a vacuum. That's not how limited and sealed plays out. Yes, there might be some outliers that are overwhelmingly powerful or broken, and then that's a good idea. But in terms of getting good at a format quick, or when we actually crystallize good ideas about a format, it's after people play with the cards. It's after they get their hands on the cards and they test ideas and they reach objective results. I'm like, is my theory wrong, or is it correct, etc. So if it was up to me and I had to win that tournament and I had to do everything in my power to do so, I would get playing with the cards as much as spoiled, because I think that every single time we've done so many we've had set reviews since Monarch now. Mm-hmm. I have so many ideas, and I think sometimes I'm correct. But as soon as I touch those cards and as soon as we run a few games, it's like, okay, this makes sense. Mm-hmm. And you will hear so many terrible takes, both from us and from other people, about like what is good, what's a good strategy, what is bad. I just think you got to play. And I would not want my first experience, if I could avoid it, playing with the cards to be, on the day one of the tournament. For instance, we played a world premiere for Uprising. And Hayden, I'm not sure if you played that one blind, but I definitely didn't, because mine was the day after Hayden's, because Hayden was
because I gave you all the feedback.
And I go, hey,
I played it blind.
What's broken? He goes, 5's broken. Play 5-6-0, easy. Like, it's because obviously I probably would have played Icelander, new wizard, all this stuff, but you told me the heuristics and it was much, much easier. So I think that if you should play with as many of the cards as you can, just get like a real feel for where the power level of the cards lie. There's a seal format. I don't know how much will be revealed by then, but I'm assuming it'll be a significant amount.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, I agree. If you can, that is great. Like if we have a big chunk of the set and you can like just put together kind of like what an average Kasai deck might look like, or an average X-Brute hero or X-Guardian hero might look like, go for it. I think when you said about like evaluating cards in a vacuum, you don't have to evaluate cards in a vacuum though, and you shouldn't evaluate cards in a vacuum. Like I would be sitting down, like right now I'm looking at Kasai and I'm going, okay, Kasai, Centauri Sabers, this is what we know about Kasai from classic constructed play. This is how, or Blitz play, whatever, sorry. This is how Kasai plays, this is how you want to use Centauri Sabers. What are the cards that I'm seeing so far and how they're going to interact with what I know is how Kasai operates fundamentally? Like there's some things that you know about Kasai and second weapon and how you can utilize that hero ability. So like how does the cost structure of the cards we're seeing so far play into that? For instance, Money Where Your Mouth is cost 1, right? So if I have a blue and I have a way to get Go Again that maybe costs 1, then I have 1 cost for my first Saber, 1 cost for my Money Where Your Mouth is 1 cost for my Go Again card. That's a blue pitch value, right? I'm getting value from my hero ability. So I think there is ways that you can do it and it's not in a vacuum. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, the best way to find out anything is to play.
Next one. Last one from Discord here comes from Darkin. They say, what are your thoughts on pros farming PQs for gold foils? Of course, many of these situations involve deals made with their opponents. You take the invite, I'll take the gold foil. Fair enough, I suppose, but I wonder if this outcome is in the spirit of the competitive roadmap. I saw tweets from one pro in particular advertising they won 4 to 5 gold foils in the PQ season. I can't help but wonder how it feels to the local community. Please attempt to take a filthy casual, to think like a filthy casual when you answer. So there's a really interesting dichotomy going on in your actual question, which is you talk about, so what are your thoughts on pros? Of course, might involve deals with their opponents. Fair enough, but I wonder what the outcome of this, if this is the outcome, the spirit of the intended competitive roadmap. So you talk about the spirit of the intended competitive roadmap. Well, in the spirit of competition, the best player should win. And that sometimes means that the worst players will lose every single time, and that one person will win 5 gold foils. So I actually think that the spirit of competition here is not your ideal scenario either, because you're talking about pro players coming in, spiking these, making money from them, winning 5 gold foils, and then players that are maybe a little bit below them, maybe still very, very good players on their own, sort of lose out on 5 gold foils. But that is true competition. That is the best player winning. If it's done through deals, like obviously that's not fair. That's probably illegal, even in the game's rules. Whatever. But yeah, I don't know this. I picked up this question because there was one point. I told Hayden this before he hopped on the pod. There was one point when my locals had come up and complained to me. I wasn't even playing these events, that Brody Spurlock had not conceded to them at some point in a tournament to give them an invite to a ProQuest. This is before they passed down. And it was just like the weirdest thing to me. Because, yes, Brody already had his invite. But the entitlement to the PQ is like, oh, why couldn't he just... Because he doesn't want to lose. That's it. That's fine. And that's a fine answer. It's like there was like this weird idea that he was like morally obligated to pass things down, which I could understand. I mean, I understand that someone wants to go, they want the invite, but you're not entitled to the invite. You're not entitled to the win. Nothing. He beat you fair and square. It's not yours. And if his goal to play these tournaments is just to win, it's not to get invites, it's not to win gold foils, it's just to win, and he maintains that by not conceding, good on him. That's competition. So I think it's fine that players win 4 to 5 in a row if they're cheating to do it, like, splitting things and I guess conceding to each other and making these bribe-based deals, which is, I think, actually against the rules, then that's probably not great. But I understand on a local level if it feels bad when someone from out of town comes in and spikes away your gold foil, but that is competition. I mean, that is what, I don't know, I guess the real world of Flesh and Blood is. Like, you don't get to just, you're not going to be given wins ever, and especially as you go up the ladder to tier 3, tier 4, like we want players to win, to put in the work and put in the effort and deserve it. So while it might not feel good when 5 gets spiked away, and like I said, caveat, if they're cheating to do it, then if they're making bribes and all that stuff, that's not great. But I think that is the spirit of competition. And what are they going to do against that? And say if you can't play, if you've attended a pro tour this year, no. I mean, they're open events. So the best player wins.
That's a lot. I think, first of all, price splits are perfectly legal and within the rules of the game. Price splits just have to involve every player remaining in the event, though. So, you can't price split into a top 8, for instance.
Sounds like he was assuming that this was happening beforehand, right? Or it was like they were making the deal kind of beforehand, and yeah.
Sure. I think your pitch on, best players win, it's competitive, no one deserves the invite, etc. Get it. But I think actually what that highlights is potentially a problem with the competitive roadmap. So I think when I'm reading this question from Darkin, I think in terms of when Darkin highlights the spirit of the intended competitive roadmap, I think they're referring, and this is at least how I'm interpreting it, they're referring more to, I guess, what LSS want the competitive roadmap to be, which is players utilizing the ProQuest season or the Road to National season as a way to qualify for these events. And I think actually what you just said highlights the fact that I think the system's kind of broken. That I don't think that it functions as a qualification process as much as it also functions as a local competitive event, open event, like you just said. So if I compare this to like Magic and how you used to qualify for Magic Pro Tours, right? It was like once you'd got your invite, you actually couldn't play in these Pro Tour qualifiers anymore. You gain your invite, you now couldn't enter a qualifier because you were qualified. And I think obviously LSS want as many people playing as possible. They want the game to grow. They want these events to, maybe they want them to have the best players and they want the same people to win them. That's fine. But is that kind of the right system? Is that the right approach? I don't know. Like, I think all the things you said are like valid points in terms of, best player wins, people shouldn't concede, people should be playing to win. If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best, etc. I completely agree with all that. But is that kind of what a qualification system should look like? I don't know. And that's kind of what when I read Darkin's question, I'm like, I don't know. The system to me kind of seems like it might be a little bit broken, to be honest.
That's because it's predicated off of EV. Like if you put $1,000 of EV at the gold foil, what do you think's going to happen? You just made it an objectively correct decision for someone to come in and try to win it that maybe shouldn't be attending that ProQuest.
Maybe, but hold up. Okay, let me throw this out there.
I think you're right. Hold on. I think that you could go through a system where after you've won, maybe you don't get another. But is that too janky? And is it incentivizing the wrong thing? Where now you're just
it's janky. You're punishing. Now
players.
You're price splitting with people and all this kind of stuff. You're like doing back. That's awful. I think you're right. That is not a way to go down. What I would say though is you have people traveling to battle hardens when people talk about EV and all this. It's like a battle harden. The EV at battle harden is dreadful. But people still travel to different countries to play them. They're not doing that because they're the EV. They're doing that because they enjoy the game and they want to play the game. So you have this kind of dichotomy between encouraging people to just play the game and enjoy and be at any Flesh and Blood event they want versus people not being able to play because they've already gained their invite or whatever. So it's a tough one, right? You want incentive for people to play, but you also potentially want a system that fits and feels good to qualify for an event. So it's
where
it's
exactly
I don't think
do you draw the line? It's not clear. And should you draw a line at all? It's like, where exactly do you draw the line? Who should and should not be able to play? Who should and should not be able to win is really what you're asking, is who should and should not be able to win? And I don't know.
That's a tough one.
It's like a crazy, the true aspect of competition is kind of what's happening. Like these people are just winning them over and over again because they put in the, I don't even think it's a good system. I do agree it feels bad. Like it doesn't feel good when someone comes out and is just spiking the gold flood of your local community. People have tried to implement things to prevent that as well in the past, but
those are terrible, obviously.
Yeah, those are terrible. As in, like, we are, doing 15 private signups. It's only our armory group, etc. And we have like a road to nationals.
It's just awful.
But I think it's ultimately the reason why this happens with the gold foils is because they're so valuable. Like that's why these players are taking time out of their day to win them. And that's also why it feels bad to lose them, I guess. Because why does it feel bad? It's because the same player is running away with the $1,000 prize every single time. I don't know. I don't think that the system's inherently bad at the moment, to be honest, even if it leads to these feel bad moment where one player is winning over and over again.
Yeah. In an ideal world, one of the things in my ideal world is like, you're actually in a position, or the company's in a position where they can offer travel incentives for prizes rather than
that'd be great.
That would be,
Yeah, the whole gold foil thing. It's promo-based prizing is inherently Ponzi-nomic as well. So like the value of whatever these promos are is set by the market, and it should inherently trend down. But I guess that's kind of out of LSS's control, is like that these things are worth $1,500. So now you have people flying in to a local to a local road to Nat, their local ProQuest to win them. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a symptom of like these conditions that LSS is not inherently in control of. But they could maybe add, they could maybe interject a bit to help. But ultimately, I don't think the system is too flawed.
Mm. Okay, we got some Twitter questions to round it out. Brendan, do you want to throw those our way to close it out?
And the last one, or not the last one, the first one from Twitter here comes from Sam O'Byrne. They said, "What are you guys hoping to see from both Fab coverage and Fab content in 2024?"
I want more videos from those guys at 3 Floating. That's what I want, Brendan.
Yeah. You start with coverage because coverage is an easy one. You just throw shade at coverage. So, yeah, you should record drafts. It's just like, I mean, Flesh and Blood will die on the hill. At this point, I do think that multiple years into it, with the feedback they've gotten, they're happy to die on the hill of we will not record a draft. We'll see if they change that. I do think that the player narratives, we've talked about this plenty of times, need to be pushed a lot more. And yeah, just overall quality of production. There are some outliers there. There are some good productions, but Tier 4 event production needs to go up drastically. I think that what Magic the Gathering is doing right now, and I know that Magic the Gathering has a lot of flaws, but when I watch a pro tour of Magic, like, I'm thoroughly entertained. It is seamless. Like, there is constant content. We go from match to match to match. The quality is great. The audio quality is great. The video quality is great. And it feels really professional. Even though I don't really like watching the game, I'm very, very impressed when I watch coverage. So I hope that Flesh and Blood looks to them as a bit of an example. Not in every single way, right? They're not perfect. But we have a lot of leveling up to do when it comes to coverage, especially when it comes to weaving player narratives.
I agree with all that. I think if I will speak to content, I think from content, I was not joking when I said more videos from 3 Floating. I think the production value that Sam and the Hayden and Jacob put into their videos is fantastic. I'd like to see more of that kind of level of quality. And it's really hard. Like, as content creators, Brennan, like we know how hard it is to produce kind of, any level of content, let alone, top level content. So I think that is, if there is people out there who have the wherewithal and the ability, the funds, the time to do that, that's kind of what I want to see more of, is just high production value in content creation. And what I would love to see for content creation in 2024 is I would like to see. Okay,
I'm wondering if you're gonna take mine out of my. Go ahead.
I want the channel fireball of Flesh and Blood. That's what I want. I want to see the top players in the world get some experience creating content. I think first of all, experience creating content, because it does take some time, I think, to be able to understand what your voice is and how to curate the content you create. But I think a platform for that would be fantastic, to be honest. And I know there's some platforms out there. I just don't think so far they've been the right fit for this game. So
yeah, and I have a few thoughts as to why that's the case. Obviously, there's like you got to curate that. It's a big effort, but ultimately, a lot of those websites really don't pay well, and I think they can pay a lot better, to be honest. And that's coming from experience. In terms of content, what I want to see is more people in the likeness of what Gorganian Tome did, recording the actual history of the game. I think that's really interesting. I think it's really, really cool to have people aggregate content and then tell an actual story of like what actually happened. Because we have ideas what happened in the game, but often they're wrong. Like, our memories are wrong. We don't perceive like what actually occurred. And I remember that video that Gorganian Tome made about Chain was really, really cool.
That's really good.
It was really cool. It was really, really cool. So I'd like to see more people diving into like the history of the game. I just think it's fascinating.
It's not helpful for anyone else but you, Brendan, but I sent you a small video that was made on YouTube by a guy about the World Yo-Yo Championship.
I watched it.
And I like that. I want to see stuff like that out there. Like, that is like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, documentary style, but like really curated, informational, accessible. I really like that video.
Yeah. There's a lot of story. I mean, there's an unquantifiable amount of stories and narratives that occur at any given time, or any time period in Flesh and Blood that just get lost. And I think that they're fascinating. Like there's so much that goes on behind these events and all the effort and passion that is behind them. But we, like I said, I mean, it's my biggest issue with coverage. And coverage, I feel like we capture almost 0% of it, which is a big bummer. Next one is Altered Ashley. They say there's a lot of talk of needing pre-constructed decks for onboarding new players to CC, as Blitz isn't a legitimate Flesh and Blood experience. Do you agree with this? If so, what heroes would you recommend for them? I disagree. Okay. I do think that Blitz is a legitimate Flesh and Blood experience. Yeah, same.
The same thing I was about to say. All right, let's get ahead of this one. It is. But I know people have been talking about CC decks. Look, we talked about this the other week on the pod. There needs to be a better entry product for players, and I think there also needs to be a better transition product for Classic Constructed. So I would like to see I would like to see something in the vein of what they tried with the I always get the name wrong. What's it called?
What is it? Give me
the Rhina versus
Dorinthia classic thing. Battles, baby.
Classic battles. I would like to see something in that vein.
Yeah, but that's not a scam.
Yeah, that product was not correct. The pricing needs to be correct. I think it can be done with Classic Constructed or Blitz. Both would be great. And I think Classic Constructed, we've seen Classic Constructed, like, or pre-constructed decks with Blitz that people have then like taken and upgraded and stuff. And I've heard a lot of people doing that. That's great. I would also like to see it for Classic Constructed, I think, as well.
All right, I have a question for you, Hayden. What do you think I think is the best introductory product in Flesh and Blood currently?
What is it? Talishar.
Yes. It is Talishar. It is. Talishar is... No, it is. It is. Try before you buy.
From LSS, though.
I know it's not. I know it doesn't fall into that category, but in terms of like actually being able to experience the game, understand how it works, what you want to buy into, try different heroes, I mean, Talishar is the best thing for... Like, it's honestly one of the best things that exists in Flesh and Blood. It's a great tool for the game. I think that's why they haven't taken it down, because it's great marketing. But yeah, in terms of an introductory product that you can buy in paper, there's not a great one. Right now, I used to buy Magic Duel decks when I was a big card game noob. I loved it. We don't have that. We don't have a version of that in Flesh and Blood. But yeah, I do think that Talishar is great for new players. Anyway, next one. Scowling Flesh Bag. If Heavy Hitters was a blank slate, what would you like to see? What would you like to see in the set to best support the health of the game going into early 2024?
I mean, honestly, my answer is I don't know. That's the tough thing. That's the toughest part right now, is that I actually don't know the clear direction I would like to see LSS take with sets in 2024. Mm-hmm. What I would like to see at some point in 2024, maybe not Heavy Hitters, maybe not the first set, but at some point in 2024, is a reintroduction of the talent system that fits with the new direction of Flesh and Blood. That's what I would like to see. And I think that's a really big challenge for LSS. They've clearly moved away from the talent system. They've clearly moved back towards more fundamental concepts that drive variance and drive kind of almost a new dynamic to gameplay a little bit. That's more open. It's more, it allows heroes to trade on a more similar basis of the game, to play a game in a similar way. And especially that's been heightened by the recent living legend of Icelander and Lexi, I think. So, with Ice going. So, I would like to see the talent system reintroduced in a way that is sustainable for the future. And I don't know what that looks like, but I really think if we don't see any talents either re-envisioned or re-engineered in this year, and I don't just mean more cards printed for, a Dust Till Dawn effectively printed. I don't think that's what we need. We need a reimagining of what this looks like in a core set that has lore behind it, that has limited play to it. I think that needs to happen this year, and I don't know what that looks like, but I think that's LSS's challenge.
So my answer is I don't know. But if I could start with something,
nice.
I would say with limited, I would like to see a simpler limited format. Maybe be a limit on deck size in draft. And I would like to see just a format that's easier to engage with. I think the past format was bad in a lot of ways for new players. It was complicated, it was nuanced, and it was very punishing as well. And yeah, I loved watching Bright Lights Limited on the World Championship stage. I didn't love playing it, actually. I didn't have fun in most of my games, to be honest. So for me, it starts with limited. Outside of that, if you really want a hot take to skewer me on, it's that I would have heavy hitters be a core set and a rotation. So it'd be the first set. All right, last one here is from Eric Scott. They say, do you think it's possible for Fab to have a fun casual multiplayer format? 1v1 is the best game, in my opinion, but casual multiplayer just isn't there.
Yeah, I think it's 100% possible. And I think we've talked a lot about UPF in the past, and I've played a little bit of UPF. I don't think ultimately it hasn't felt to me like it's the answer for this question. But it has been, like, I think as more heroes have been introduced, it has changed a lot, and it seems a lot more enjoyable. And there's people that really enjoy UPF and play a lot of UPF. I think if LSS really put the time and effort into it, it could be UPF. I think actually what's missing right now is the marketing of UPF and the kind of selling it to the players more than developing product. I think there's a lot of cards, like printing and templating, that's already been done for multiplayer. I think what's actually missing is kind of the end product. It's like, is more like the kind of, what that looks like to players, and players being able to imagine themselves actually playing this format. Because right now, I think as a player at almost any level, and for a lot of groups of players, it's really hard to imagine yourself sitting in a UPF table. And I think that's LSS's challenge right now.
I feel like they shoved UPF down our throats in 2023, actually. Like, I felt like it was forced, but that's just me.
But did you want to play it?
No. My core aspect here of this question is that, unfortunately, I'm just not the player. I'm not the person to ask. The person who can answer this is like diehard Commander players that play Flesh and Blood. Like, what's missing in Flesh and Blood that exists in Commander that we could maybe shore up? But at the end of the day, just how my brain ticks, I can't sit there and wait for 3 players to resolve their turns before I can play the game. I cannot do it in Commander. I cannot do it in UPF. So I'm not going to play the format almost no matter what. And I'm not saying it's an issue with UPF. That's an issue with me. I just can't do it.
I have one counter to that, is that in Commander, you do have to be engaged during your opponent's turn a lot more than you have to in UPF. That is also one of my issues with it. And I think one of the issues with UPF is that it's very
asymmetric.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even more so than Commander and Magic. And I think that's, like, you can't even really build to not be asymmetric. Like in Magic, you can. Like in Commander, right? You can be like, okay, I'm going to build this, like, counterspell deck, or this deck that, like, triggers a lot of my opponent's, like, interactions. And there's a little bit of that in UPF, but, like, honestly, it's pretty, for a majority of the heroes, like, it's, if I get attacked, I block. Otherwise, I only play on my turn.
Yeah, Commander's actually even worse for me, because there's decks that take 20 game actions, and there's decks that take one. And you're just like sitting there, just like, oh my god,
it takes longer.
What am I doing here?
UPF can be pretty long though, dude.
Yeah, I don't know about UPF. I mean, I disagree with you. I actually think that they've really amped up the marketing, and I felt like they were really pushing it on us in 2023. Because for me, like, as a player that was absolutely not interested in the format for the reasons I stated, I was just like, geez, like, I don't care about all these things. There's like, oh, this product, that product, but and then all the new cards
they did,
yeah, all the new.
But, like, where was the support? Like, where's the at-home events, or hey, come into the LGS for this big UPF celebration?
I mean, at the Tier 4 events, they do like really high EV prizes for the competitive UPF events at these things.
That's the wrong. Okay, here's a story for you. At Melbourne, at the calling in Melbourne, there's nearly 300 players playing. There's probably in excess of 500 players in the hall. They're making a call at 5 past the event time that has already started, saying we need a 4th person to fire the event, the UPF event, where the winner gets a gold foil legendary.
Yeah,
they couldn't find a 4th player to fire the event. They were calling over the intercom for 2 or 3 minutes, like, at different times, trying to find someone. That's a failure. Like, that is not a success. Like, that is not the way. Like, UPF is not that format. And I think, cool that they're going to do that. And for the players who, want to play that event, sure. But, like, and for, these casual players to be able to come and compete in a, like, semi-competitive way that has some really great prizing, that's cool. But, like, I mean, that's not a success story, really, is it? 3 people ready to play and they can't even fire the event. Like, that's, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, UPF is an enigma to me, Hayden. I don't know. I don't know why people don't like it. I don't know why some people do like it. I sort of have a hard barrier with, like, even kind of diving more into it myself. So, yeah, I mean, I just don't know. I do think, though, that it's a huge, like, LSS is looking at that as, like, this is going to push our game. It does
Yeah,
feel
they need
like
to do a better job of it then.
I mean, Alice, in terms of marketing too, that's just a funny little side point. They have really amped up the marketing. I don't know if you've seen on the Twitter, like they definitely got a new graphic design artist in house, and like they're doing all these posts on social media. It's just funny that's coming 3 years in, but they are finally doing it.
And they've had stuff like guest content on.
Yeah, but
Alex's
now they
website
obviously
around
have
UPF
someone
and stuff like that.
I don't know
Yeah,
if you've
for sure.
seen, yeah.
But I'd love to see a Welcome to Wraith, farewell to Welcome to Wraith style event with these kind of, cool participatory promos and things like that for like a UPF celebration. Like get people, like I would go in and try UPF. You know what I mean? Like get people in the door to try UPF, get the foot in the door, get people in to try it, and then build from there. But the product's there, great, and they're piling on like UPF, but like actually get people in the door to play it first of all is a challenge as well. Anyway.
That's it. That's all the questions. That's Twitter and Discord. Just want to say thank you to everybody who did submit a question. I really appreciate it. We had some great ones this time. We definitely went over our recording time, but that's usually how these go.
Yeah. No, nothing else to say. I think you can just take us out. Again, thank you for the questions. And if you do want to get questions in for the Commander Cookout, our weekly kind of question segment, you can do so. ArsenalPassFab@gmail.com. Drop in the YouTube comments below. I think we got a great question from YouTube this past week, which we'll definitely make sure to get. We'll sort of hash together the previous two pods in our Commander Cookout section next week, Brennan.
Yep. video version of this at youtube.com/ArsenalPass. Twitter is Finn_Dale, Brendan APG, and big shout out to all the Arsenal Pass patrons. You help us do what we do, and that's why we're clocking in. I mean, I think we're close to like 3 years here, which is pretty crazy. Been a long time, Hayden, but thank you all.
Almost 3 years.
Yeah, thank you all so much again. We'll see you in the next episode.